Thank you for joining me for another episode of Awaken and Power TV. I'm your host, Ethan Fox. I'm joined today by Winston Shrout, who's been with me a couple of times in the past. So this is your first time watching Winston on my show. You may want to catch up with the earlier episodes as we go more in depth into his biography and history and how he ended up going in this particular direction. We don't really focus on that so much in this show. Today we talk more about the impending changes in the global legal and financial system, in particular, what's happening in the United States with the issuance of potentially a new currency and some of the various changes on a governmental level that are happening. We further talk about some of the extra-dimensional and extraterrestrial influences. And I also want to mention that Winston will be doing a multiple-day workshop at the ECETI Ranch with James Gilliland at the beginning of September 2016. And he'll be joining, both of them will be joining us actually for our Awaken Empowered Expo this November 4th, 5th, and 6th in Detroit, Michigan. And he'll be giving a lecture as well as a workshop there also. We will be having quite a number of incredible presenters at that event, including Winston and James, Dr. Eric Pearl, Dr. Robert Schock, who's going to be speaking about ancient civilizations. And Eric Pearl, of course, is the founder of Reconnective Healing. Michaela Sheldon will be there, and of course I will be as well. Kevin Ryan, Ken Chorley, quite a variety of other presenters. We do have a Chinese herbalism presentation by George Lamoureux of Jing Herbs. An incredible lineup that you don't want to miss. Adam Apollo will be coming back as well. So do join us for that, and we'll be talking more about that in future episodes of this show and give you more details, as well as have more guests on the show who will be presenting at the expo. So without any further delay, here's Winston Shrout. Hi, Winston. Welcome to Awaken and Power TV. It's great to have you back. We've been on my show a couple of times now, and you are, I know you're planning a couple of workshops, one coming up at ECETI in September, about a month away, not even a month away, at the ECETI Ranch, September 2016. And then you're going to be out at our Awaken Empowered Expo for the second time this year in November, November 4th, 5th, and 6th of this year. So we're very excited to have you back here in Michigan and also to have you on my show. So welcome back again. And where are you based again? I can't quite remember.
We're in Oregon, and believe it or not, the sun is shining today, so great things are happening.
Great. Now, I wanted to spend a lot of time on this show talking about, and I know there have been a lot of developments that have happened since the last time you've been with me, even since you've been at our expo this past March, but the previous year when you were on my show. And I wanted to spend some time about discussing what's been going on in the global financial system and the governmental system, especially in the United States. There have been a lot of occurrences. So maybe for those who are, well, let's start with a little bit of background, because I think a lot of people who would watch my show and a lot are very interested in metaphysical subjects and the awakening of consciousness, obviously. And for those people who are more spiritually minded, when they hear the word commerce, their eyes sort of glaze over because they don't have a concept of what that is, and it sounds like money and exchange of goods, and so maybe you can give a very simple and quick explanation of what is commerce and why would it matter to somebody who is on a spiritual journey, and then we can go from there.
Sure. The title of the upcoming seminar at ECETI is going to be Removing Commercial Karma Part 2. So last year we did, at the same time, we did Removing Commercial Karma Part 1. So we thought, well, let's just continue on with that. The term commerce is an overriding concept. Most people, when they hear that word, they think of business. However, business is a subset of commerce. The word commerce being an kind of a overreaching concept and so forth. So most people do, when they hear the word commerce, they think of business. But again, business is just a part of commerce. Commerce deals with the interaction of people, either on the planet, and as we go a little bit further, perhaps we can talk about some of the interplanetary commerce that goes on, because there is quite a bit of it going on, whether people are aware of that or not. And then perhaps, as part of our discussion, we could emphasize what's necessary for people who are used to operating strictly on the business level to perhaps raise their perspectives a bit and to start to consider the way they do business. Will it conform to the commercial principles that we're presently operating with? And as we evolve into interplanetary commerce, does your business mind, does it conform to some of those principles that would allow you to do business with some entity from someplace else? And so we can discuss some of those things as we go along. Perhaps in the second part of our discussion here today, we want to go into some of the things relating to some of this interplanetary business that's going on and so forth. Perhaps to understand commerce from a short historical review, perhaps. We've been operating, first off, let me put it this way. Probably most of the audience that will hear this are English speakers. And so you'll understand perhaps that when I make this statement that our present system of commerce is an invention of Christianity. In other words, Christianity and capitalism, free enterprise system are all inventions of Christianity. For instance, people of other persuasions and so forth simply don't do business this way. But as they involve themselves in international commerce, which is run by the present system, then they're basically forced into operating in this manner, at least while they're involved in international. So we have international currencies, we have all these banking things, we have all these financial matrices, we have the international laws and so forth to regulate and hopefully to make commerce run smoothly on the planet. Unfortunately, it has not been running too smoothly, so corrections that have had to be made. So I'll perhaps talk about some of these corrections here just in a moment, as I give some of the updates about affairs here in the United States. First off, let me say that the history that you studied in school is incorrect. Without going into a lot of the details of that, it'd be wise for people to go back and reevaluate your perspective of history here in the United States with certain key ingredients. Just as a quick refresher, for those of you who recall what's called the Civil War, there was a new federal government that was created at that time, and they incorporated Washington, D.C., and so there was a new kid on the block. And so in that respect, there were actually two governments running all at the same time. We had the original jurisdiction, which operated under the Constitution for the United States of America. And then we had another thing, which was basically provided for in that Constitution, which was what's called basically a legislative democracy. I'm not really sure that term applies because as the thing moved on, it rapidly turned into a fascist organization. And I could explain perhaps that here in a moment. In any event, the quick history was the new federal government had gone into debt on purpose and by design, with the unions, Bank of England, all that bunch, so forth. And they were incapable of meeting that debt. And in consequence of that, I'm not really sure at what date, but they went into a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Now, those who are not familiar with Chapter 11, a Chapter 11 bankruptcy is for corporations. And the one who the party that files for the Chapter 11 is known as the debtor in possession. Now, some of your audience needs to go and perhaps look up some of those terms and understand them and so forth. But in essence, what it meant was that the debtor in possession assumed the role of trustee in that bankruptcy. And so you in any bankruptcy, the operation of the trustee is to represent the interest of the creditors. Now, if the corporate government at that point was representing the interest of the creditors, the question had to be asked, who are the creditors? And so we find this new Chapter 11 debtor in possession / trustee representing the interest of the Bank of England, the Rothschilds, and all those people. That's exactly who they were representing. And that's caused us no end of problems. Now, key to it is, again, as the new federal government rolled along as a corporation, well, let me describe what fascism is. And perhaps a lot of your audience has listened to that movie by Russo called Freedom to Fascism. And they should, if they haven't, you can find it on the internet. You can watch it for free. Go and review that movie because he does a very good job of explaining that. In any event, this new government, what was in fact a corporation of the worst type. And in consequence of that, that's why I say that that government is a fascist government, and we've been under fascism now for a very long time. Okay, now, in a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the debtor in possession can maintain that position only if they successfully run the reorganization. If, in fact, the debtor in possession / trustee is found to be delinquent in their responsibilities, then certain things happen. And I'm not really sure what day it was, but approximately 2 years ago, because the United States Incorporated, which was a corporation that was running the operation, apparently were doing a poor job, and in consequence of that, they were put into receivership. Now, the receiver in the bankruptcy at that point was the Queen's Council in Switzerland. So they were the receiver in the bankruptcy. And I'm not sure, I used to have the names of some of these, and I'm not really sure who the trustee was that was appointed, because at that point, the debtor in possession got booted out as trustee, and so a new trustee was appointed by the Queen's Council. Okay, so that was a couple of years ago, and as things continued to roll along, it was found out that they could not recover sufficiently to resume that position or to stay within the Chapter 11. And here coming up last spring, there was, I think, a $440 billion payment, which they had to make to stay within that bankruptcy, and they could not meet it. In consequence of that, on May the 2nd of this year, they went into default. So that corporation was disincorporated, and along with all of its sub-corporations. And so in consequence of that, a lot of people are, making all kinds of things about, President Obama's doing this and President Obama's doing it. It has absolutely no effect. Absolutely no effect. because he is not authorized to sign off on anything at this point. Which leads me to the next portion of it. The thought process here is that all these things have been carefully watched for the longest time, certainly since the Civil War. The country has been under military occupation by the United States Army. And so in consequence of the way things were looking down the road at some point, and I don't know when exactly they formed this, although I've known it's been in existence perhaps for at least 7 or 8 years that I've known about. The U.S. military, in fact, did create an interim republic, which was completely staffed and functionable in the event that they had to step forward, and it looked very, very foreboding that they would have to step forward. And so they did. In January of 2015, this new government started into operation. And so you had conflicting governments, I'll put it that way. You had some conflicts going on in the old government, which was basically controlled by the cabals. And that would be the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, the Bush cabals, and certainly the new Clinton cabal, who are very closely aligned with the Bush cabal and so forth. In any event, so there was a real tug of war going on for a long time there. And I don't need to review all that history to this point, but it has continued on. And so certainly when the United States Incorporated, whose CEO was Mr. Obama, anyway, when that corporation, which was already in receivership, defaulted on the payment that they were required to make to stay in the bankruptcy, when they defaulted, then certainly these officers of that corporation lost all power. So we get down to our present time. Now, this is in conjunction with something that has been worked on for a very long time, centuries even. I could go back and tell the whole history about Saint Germain and all the things he had done to prepare for this. In any event, it's come to a head now, and I think the pimple is about ready to pop, if I can use that expression. In any event, this had to do with a restructuring of the financial matrix on the whole planet. Now, perhaps when we get into the ET thing a little bit, we can go back in history to see when the thing went sideways on us, because we have the introduction back in the days of Babylon by some groups from Orion, who introduced the concept of interest, usury, and all those kind of things. And so we've had to deal with that for centuries and centuries and centuries. But in any event, the whole thing has come to an end at this point. Now, with the restructuring of the financial matrix, some of the key elements which were involved with it had to do with what's called the Basel Agreements for International Banking. And these are basically agreements that had been reached by all the nations and so forth in regards to how they would function in international banking. Perhaps the key to it, and the thing that really put the pressure on, was what's called the Basel III Agreement, which in essence, among other things, required that any currency from any nation, in order to be able to trade internationally, would have to be substance-backed. And the substance of choice, as it turns out, is gold. Gold has always been an issue on this planet for the simple reason that gold grows on this planet. It actually grows. I mean, there's certain frequencies and so forth that allow for the production of gold on this planet. So this planet has always been of interest. I mean, I talked to one fella who had a memory or a history of coming on this planet before it was actually populated. He was a Pleiadian, and he had come on this planet, I think, about 180,000 years ago. And the purpose to be here was to mine gold. And so we've had this interest, I should say, in this planet for a very long time, principally because of gold. And as we get the introduction of gold into commerce, then there have been problems which have come from it. Gold itself is a noble metal. It doesn't rust, it doesn't oxidize, and so forth. So that has been yet another reason why gold has been used. But, well, I won't go over all the problems. But let me say that in regards to Basel III, in our international here, the emphasis has been on substance backing for a nation's currency. Now, this new interim republic, which is in place only as an interim until constitutional elections can be held, which will happen in November, they had no gold with which to issue a new currency. In essence, what had happened in January of 2013, because of certain things that had been done, the Federal Reserve banks were unable, as private central banks, to recharter. In consequence of that, they were melded into the United States Treasury at that point. And so then there was a kind of a domino effect that happened. In essence, what was determined was that the Federal Reserve notes were no longer useful. They had caused too many problems. And so they were on the way out. And so certain operations were put into effect by the Chinese to create a currency which was substance-backed, which is the Chinese yuan, which is presently the reserve currency on the planet against which all currencies are measured. And then the move was to remove the Federal Reserve notes from commerce, which is being done at present. But in our country here, now this is I'm talking here internationally with all this business about reserve currencies and so forth. But in any event, in our country here, this new interim government, which had the responsibility to introduce a viable currency for use in the United States, they had a huge responsibility. Most people, maybe many in your audience, are not aware that with the use of the Federal Reserve notes, which is an international currency, the United States was actually the only nation on the planet that didn't have its own national currency. And look at all the problems that's caused for the United States and the people here. I mean, I won't go into all those problems, but certainly your viewers would be aware of some of those at least. In any event, the Federal Reserve notes were on the way out. The new interim officers, mainly the military, had to devise a means in order to create a viable currency in preparation for a restoration of a republic form of government here in the United States. So they were given a certain amount of gold by the Chinese elders, who have a whole bunch of gold apparently. In any event, now that they had the gold with which to comply with Basel III, then the first thing they did was create a government-level currency, which is known as Treasury Reserve Notes, and those have been trading on the international now for well over a year. Well over a year they've been trading on the international. Now that's government-level money. So the question is, what are we going to use on the street? I mean, how are we going to carry on business? With a new currency. And so what was created is known as United States notes, and they truly are notes. For those of you who have ever looked at a Federal Reserve note, a $1 bill or whatever, that's not a note. I mean, I know enough about negotiable instruments to know that item right there is not a note. It would best be described as a perpetual annuity bond. And again, that's what's caused all of our problems in our business and commerce here in the United States and internationally. In any event, the new United States notes should have been out, and there's been a lot of talk about this, some serious talk about this, of why those new United States notes are not available for use by the people. And perhaps I can get into that a little bit for some of those reasons. There's been quite a bit of blockage going on. So perhaps I should discuss here momentarily the concept or the operation of what's known as the revaluation of currencies. I can't remember. I think it started in either 2000 or 2014. It was felt by the elders that they needed to get these currencies across the planet re-evaluated as far as their viability and a comparison of the value of them. So they started to work on what's known as the RV, the revaluation of currencies, wherein they came in and in essence had to do an evaluation of the relative value of a nation's currency as compared to the currencies of other countries. And so the evaluation of those currencies were based upon substance, gold, the natural resources such as oil, timber. Anyway, these currencies, gross national product was a consideration to make a comparative, basically a hierarchy for currencies and so forth. And so they worked on this for a number of years, and with some ups and downs. I mean, there were a few hiccups, and so they had to go back and do a little bit more work on, for instance, the Iraqi dinar. The Iraqis first claimed they could produce X amount of oil. But when push comes to shove, it's found out they could only produce a third of that much. Okay, back to the drawing board we go. So along the line, they had to do quite a bit of work to get some of these currencies valued as to their true value in comparison to the values of other countries. Now, prior to that time, basically a nation's currency was valued by the central bank of that country. And that was a complete mess, because the central banks were simply using their ability as a central bank to simply rip off all the values of the countries and put them into the banks, which was their nature. In any event, with this RV and the evaluation of the true nature of a country's currency, then we put a stop to the rape of the planet by the central banks. So that was very, very valuable. So in that respect then, as these currencies were reevaluated, and as the different things happened, and I think I know a little bit more about that than I want to talk about at present, but in any event, they come down to the situation here in the United States with this new interim government, and then those who were put in power to effect those things started to monkey with it. And I won't go into all the details of that, but in regards to why don't we have the United States notes on the street for use by the people, the problem is right here in the United States. Some of these who have been put into authority to effect these things have monkeyed with it, and and the heads are rolling, I'll put it that way. In any event, we expect here shortly to see the United States notes on the street for use by the people. I think perhaps some of your listeners are even involved with some of these currencies they have invested in. I think primarily the one that everybody likes is the Zimbabwe bond. And then some of the other currencies, I don't know how many there are, but people have invested in those things. with the idea that later on they would be able to redeem them at a higher rate than they paid for them, which would show a profit, which is okay. I mean, it's good investing if you like, if it happens, and it will happen, by the way, here shortly, because all of the countries go all at once or none. And it's almost gotten down to the point it looked like it's going to be none. And then we had to do certain things. Perhaps I'll discuss some of that here momentarily to assure that these things would happen. Because when we get talking about the intervention of the ETs and so forth, the Galactic Federation has a hand in this. And it's not going to fail. Let me put it to you that way. It is not going to fail. To what extent the ETs have to intervene to make sure that it doesn't fail depends on what we do here on the third dimension and so forth. Because all these ETs come in at a much higher dimension. I mean, I don't know any of them that are coming in at less than fifth dimension. And as we talk a little bit here in a minute, we have some ninth dimensional Arcturians who are deeply involved in this. So we'll get into that a little bit later, perhaps. But in any event, we expect here shortly the United States notes to be available, because those who are redeeming those currencies will be paid in United States notes, not Federal Reserve notes. They'll be paid in United States notes. So that's been one of the hang-ups, with all this falderah, if I can use that word. And like I say, heads are rolling because of it. I'll put it that way. Now, do you have any questions so far with that?
Well, that's good so far. I guess a couple of things. You talked about the interim government. I'd like to know, you mentioned the everything that happened back in May, and that Obama was the CEO of this corporation, the United States corporation. But can you talk a little bit about what that actual legal governmental structure is or was, and what is it now? Who's really in charge of the United States corporation or the United States at the moment?
Okay, the United States Incorporated is no longer functionary. They can't. They went into default on May the 2nd, so they have absolutely nothing to do with any official government here within the United States. Even though the mass media, which is controlled by the cabal, keep putting these faces and these people up on front of the camera, rest assured that simply is not the case. Again, this interim government was created by the military, and they have their authority, again, from the results of the Civil War. People don't realize, the Civil War was not a war between the states. The Civil War was a war of the federal government against all of the states. And in consequence of that war, then the whole of the land area of what we call the United States of America. Finally, we got Alaska and Hawaii into it. But in any event, all of these have been under military occupation since the Civil War. So the ultimate control, the ultimate power within the United States is, in fact, the military, in particular the United States Army, because they're the land force. And so, they rule because of the Civil War. Now, we don't have time to go into all the history of the development of the shadow governments and the states, how they complied with that, and how they changed the laws and the Constitution and everything else. We don't have time for all that. But the ability or the power and the authority and the precedent for this interim government to step forward is based upon the military occupation that has started around, let's say, 1865. Okay, so they're fully authorized to move forward, and they knew they were. And so they planned for this particular situation here that we're facing, well in advance. Like I say, I had known about the formation of the structure, and I think they were stationed in West Virginia. Some people say Virginia. I was told by my CIA contact. Everybody's got contacts. Everybody got insiders to tell them stuff. Anyway, my insider told me that they were stationed in West Virginia, so I'll go with that, whatever. But in any event, it was obvious that they had to step forward because it was obvious that the United States Incorporated was not, which was in receivership at that point, were not going to perform on that bankruptcy. So like I say, in January of 2015, the interim government went operational. And if you want to test it out, go to the White House and knock on the front door and see if Mr. Obama answers. I mean, there's the real proof of it right there. And check it out. Does he fly around on Air Force One anymore? Who's flying around on Air Force One now? And so last word I got about 2 days ago was that he had gone on a flight somewhere and he had crossed the anyway, they lost radar contact with him. I don't know where he's at right now. If he's trying to hide, he's in real trouble because he can easily be found. But in any event, this new interim government is operating on that basis with the purpose to restore us. I really hate the word restore because we've never had a republic. Anybody that's studied history in detail would know that we've never had a republic, never have had. A lot of people think, well, President Washington, he was our first president and all this kind of stuff. Go read your history, for crying out loud. Or listen to some of my lectures on the subject matter, and you'll find out very quickly we've never had a republic. So it's not really restoring the republic so much as instituting a republic form of government. So the military certainly is playing a big hand in this. One of the things that will happen is that when we have fair elections, and by the way, no criminals will be allowed to run in this election. Let me reemphasize, no criminals will be allowed to run for office in this election. In any event, whoever the people choose in November to be the president of the United States of America and so forth, they will start to restructure, reformat. And the biggest problem that they'll run into is what's called the administration. Now, a lot of people don't know this, perhaps, the statistics, but at the present time, approximately 50% of the available workforce is working for the government, federal, state, county, local governments. 50% of the workforce. It's no wonder we don't have any industry going on in this country. If you take 50% of the workforce, most of them, college educated and all those kind of things, working for this corporation called shadow government and so forth. My goodness gracious. Okay, so even though we have fair elections for the president, vice president, and so forth coming up here in November, the main problem will be to re-educate and to streamline the new government. And, for people who have done a job, for 10, 20 years or whatever, with the fascist point of view, how long will it take to get them re-educated on these correct principles that we're working with here? Let me suggest that there will be a huge streamlining that will have to be done. So in other words, if someone can't be re-educated, they simply have to be let go back into the civilian population and so forth. So that's going to take just a little bit of work. Going to take a little bit of time to get people re-educated or released. because we simply cannot have a republic with a bunch of administrators who have the mindset of a fascist. We can't have that. So those things will have to be worked on. Congress will have to be revamped. The justice system will have to be worked. Well, all these things are being worked on. All these things are being worked on and have been for a number of years now. In any event, it's going to take just a little while, so everybody shouldn't think, we're just going to flip a light switch on and everything's going to change. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. It's going to take a lot of work. So in the meantime, people should not be discouraged about some of the mid-level, low-level administrators who have previously operated under the old thought process, the old regime. It'll take just a little while to get everybody straightened out on that. So people should not become discouraged. And people keep asking me, Winston, all these things you've taught for all these years with solutions in commerce, will those things still be viable with this new republic? And for the most part, they still will be, because you're going to have a lot of problems. As a matter of fact, on this upcoming seminar we're going to do at ECETI, aside from some of the other things, we will be going over the process to deal with third-party debt collectors and also traffic tickets. Now, these at the lowest levels, these are things that people seem to be dealing with all the time. So we will be going over those items, the solutions, how to resolve those kind of problems, along with some of these a little bit more esoteric and higher level thought processes that we'll be going into. So anyway, they're here for a little while. There's going to be just a few bumps in the road, and so people need to be prepared for that. And certainly, those who've been studying and working on these things for years and years and years, need to be friendly to your families and to your friends and to your communities and so forth, because if you have truly made a study of these things, then you have the responsibility to your family and your community and so forth to bring these things forward so that they'll understand what's happening. Because, if you have no idea what just happened, you don't know what to do. And so people would generally be confused when things are not just as they were, a few months ago. Now, the key to a smooth transition into this new concept, again, is the money. And that is, if people all of a sudden they go to the bank, and instead of getting Federal Reserve notes, they get these new United States notes, and they find out they can spend them just like they had previously done with the Federal Reserve notes. That's going to give them a great deal of confidence and so forth. And so people, in order to create a smooth transition, the key to it is this new currency and the ability to use it. Now, as I understand it, the Federal Reserve notes that you have in your pocket or in your bank accounts and so forth will simply be redeemed at par, dollar for dollar. I don't know if there's going to be any kind of service charge involved with that or not. I doubt it. But in any event, once people are satisfied, that the economy is not going to crash, the sky is not falling in, Chicken Little, all that silly story. But once people have a confidence in the monetary system, then these other changes that will be moving forward will not be opposed by the general population. So that's why it's so essential. And that's why, many of us, from me all the way to the top, have been, very concerned with all this hesitancy to get this new currency out onto the street. So that's being corrected. People are being arrested. People are being hauled out of the banks in handcuffs at some of the very top levels of some of the very top banks on the planet. Several of the big banks, as a matter of fact, are going under. But don't worry, your money's still safe if you're in those particular banks. And I won't name them just because I don't want to cause panic. But in any event, no, you're not going to lose your money if the bank you're doing banking with actually goes under. Some of them have already been bought up, and some of the really big ones are being bought up also. So anyway, these corrections are in effect, and the biggest complaint that myself and others have had is that it's just moving too slowly. And we know why. And so those who have blocked, those who have used leverage and so forth for whatever ends they think they have, either they will comply or they will be removed or are being removed. So people can take confidence in that.
Now, you mentioned that we're going to have fair elections and that no criminals will be allowed to run for office. How can that be referring to this particular election, at least based on what we see in the mainstream news, which portrays only two people running for office? That it's questionable whether or not they've been involved in anything but criminal projects in their lives. So how do you foresee that happening, or are you saying that it won't be this election but a future election? And finally, does it even matter who we vote for at this point?
Their names will not be on the ballot when you go to the polls. They put it just simply that way. You won't be able to vote for them because they won't be on the ballot. Now, when I say fair elections, I'm talking about elections where you go where the electronic, if they still use electronic, okay, but those electronic voting places and so forth will not be controlled by the cabal. And all of these programs and these computer programs that have manipulated the voting and so forth will not happen. So when I say fair elections, if you cast your vote for this or that, that's where your vote goes. In the past, we have had those problems, and the voting booths and so forth have been manipulated, but that's not going to happen this time. So when I talk about fair elections, what I mean is your vote will count for whomever you choose as your representative in that instance. So that should help people, I think, to have a little bit more confidence in the voting system. Now, is it a perfect system? No, it never has been a perfect system, but it's the best we have, at least for the present. And as we move forward with this restructuring, as we move into the opportunity to have a real republic where the people that we elect truly represent our interest and not the interest of the lobbyists and so forth, then those things, that's what I mean when I say fair election.
I see. And when you're saying those individuals' names won't be on the ballot, you're talking about Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and the people who are in the mainstream.
I'll just stick to no criminals will be on the ballot.
Okay.
When you start popping names into anything, then all of a sudden NSA uses those keywords and they start recording. So I'm not even going to use those words.
I see. Okay, and you anticipate that to happen by this particular election in 2016 then?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what would the average person, what are we to make of all of this mainstream hoopla over two candidates?
That's exactly what you said. Exactly right. Hoopla. Remember again who controls the mass media. And that has not been taken under control yet, but I think it soon will be, because all these lies and propaganda that are being put out, all these scripts for all these news people that are reading a script, and that's all written by the cabal people. And so, don't believe any of it. It's gone. And just as soon as the powers that be can get in control of the media, and they're working on it, then you will not be seeing those kind of broadcasts any longer.
And in terms of the currency, you're expecting this pretty much any day now, right?
Yeah. in the last I had a meeting on last Friday, and I had, I had to talk like a Dutch uncle, if you know what I mean, to get somebody motivated in a certain direction. And then we did have, in respect to that meeting, we did have an intervention by some of the Arcturians to remove some of the controlling devices and chips in this individual. And there were 5 in there. There were 5 devices, if I can use that word, that was in this particular individual who made many decisions in regards to this. And so those things were, because, I'd worked with this individual for a number of years, and brilliant individual. He has the answers. And so he'd been put into certain positions to do certain things that have a great deal of effect on how this works out. And so I've known him and worked with him for a long time, and I kept noticing that he'd get up to a certain point, and then he'd go the other way. I kept thinking, we had it figured out, and the direction he was going was correct, yet all of a sudden he'd just stop and go a different direction. I never could figure it out. Well, that's what the problem was. He was being controlled. And so the Arcturians apparently stepped in, removed those control devices, and so now he can move forward without that hampering him. So that's been within the last 5 or 6 days.
Now, I don't suppose you want to mention the name of who this person is?
No, absolutely not. Again, once you start giving names out, then pretty soon the NSA clicks in. So no, and you wouldn't know who it was anyway. You wouldn't know who it is. See, a lot of these things that are being orchestrated from the background, if I can use that word. And so they're not prominent up front people that if I gave you their name, you wouldn't know who it was anyway. So no, I don't think I'll give any names out for some of those things, but just to give the process of what's happened, what's gone on, to facilitate, what's needed to be done. So in any event, we've turned a major corner. Here this last few days, removed some of the main blockages. As I mentioned, some of the key bankers who were blocking have been removed, taken out of the banks in handcuffs. And I could give you a few names on that, but I won't. It's just happening. That's all I can say. And apparently, we're finally getting some of those last hurdles removed, and so I think it should. These things should be operational and here certainly within days. I'll put it that way.
So what's the status of the various government agencies such as the FBI, CIA, IRS? What power do they have at the moment?
Well, that's a real interesting question, because the question I have to answer that question, I would have to ask, who's signing their paycheck now? And I don't know. There for the longest time, first off, you have to know, and people in America don't know this, but none of these agencies are tax-supported agencies. They're all corporations. And a lot of them, in particular the CIA, I think the DOJ, and some of those were actually printing their own Federal Reserve notes. Now, if they're still continuing to do that, if that's how they're supporting themselves in their operations and so forth, simply by printing up more Federal Reserve notes, just as soon as this new currency hits the streets, that comes to an end. So I don't know exactly what provisions are being made by the interim government to deal with those situations and so forth, but nobody goes to work on Monday if they didn't get paid on Friday. And so if these agencies and so forth, many of which have become totally corrupt, if they don't get paid, they're not coming to work. So I think just by natural attrition, We see a lot of changes with some of those agencies and so forth, and they've all gotten out of hand. I mean, thank you, Mr. Hoover, and thank you, Skull and Bones, and all that, for the corruption that you have created. I mean, for instance, the FBI was originally had an original, charter and so forth. It's eventually involved into the federal government. And then Mr. Hoover got in there and started blackmailing all of the presidents, politicians, and so forth, just to gain, control for the FBI. The CIA evolved into a duality. You had the good guys and the bad guys on the CIA and so forth. And so where will they get their funding, especially the dark side of the CIA? I mean, they're totally funded. I shouldn't say totally, but in many respects, they're funded by the drug trade. I mean, everybody knows that. I mean, ask anybody on the street, where those drugs coming from? Well, CIA got them. So we've had these problems for the longest time, and the only way to correct to get these things stopped is simply cut off their money. Because nobody goes to work on Monday if they don't get paid on Friday. That's just common sense. And so the only way that these things can be rectified and controlled is simply cut off their money. And so is there a use for Langley? Absolutely there is. There always has been. Is there a use for the FBI? Yes, there is. Is there a use for the U.S. Marshals, for the Secret Service, and all these entities? Yes, there is. But everybody, should realize by this time that, whoever signs your paycheck tells you what to do. And so we need to get those signatures on those paychecks into the hands of some others, different than who's been signing those paychecks up to this point. So once we get those things corrected, then I should imagine that those agencies will function properly. And so the only thing I can see to get these corrections made is the money issue, the money problems. And once that money problem has been resolved, then we'll see these necessary functions acting properly. That's the way I see it.
Is there a need for 50% of the U.S. population to be working in government? And if not, then do you think that this will result in a major restructuring of our societal approach to life when all of these changes happen?
Yeah. No, there's no reason to have 50% of the population to be employed by any level of government. Absolutely not. That's completely ridiculous. I mean, but it's kind of like a self-perpetuating monster. That's all I can say. So certainly, let's say, for instance, that they reduce the number of employees by the governments, let's say by 50%. Okay, now we have 25% of the workforce in government and 75% of the people who are out here in the public sector. Now, with this revaluation of currency, you will see, that might not happen in 2 weeks or 2 months or 6 months, but you will see the return of manufacturing here in the United States. Because, for instance, let's use tennis shoes, for instance, or basketball shoes, that are presently being manufactured in, let's say, Indonesia or Malaysia, and they're paying the worker over there, let's say, $1.50 a day to make those shoes. All right. Now, when the real value of that laborer is paid to them, then it will no longer be profitable for these big corporations to use foreign manufacturers. So of necessity, as a good business move, manufacturing will simply have to be returned to the United States. So will there be jobs? Will there be prosperity for the people, even if it's 75% of the people are in the public sector? The answer is yes. Because, again, all of our industry, whether it's clothing, textiles, building products, so forth, steel, all these kind of things have been taken out of the country because it was not profitable to the business owners and so forth to manufacture here in the United States. But when it becomes competitive in the foreign market to where they can't realize those huge profits, then you'll see manufacturing returning to the respective countries. And that's why we will have, just on natural business principles, we'll have a restoration here in this country of many of the things that have been lost because of the profit margin. So I think that's going to be a good thing.
Will the cost of goods increase, though, in the United States as a result of bringing a lot of the manufacturing into domestic production or domestic factories? Or is there something in this new economical structure that's going to offset that difference so that no one will notice the difference?
It'll take a while for people to get their mindset right. First off, I was listening to a fella, you probably listened to him too, a fella named Jim Mars. You know Jim? I like Jim. He's just a good old boy from down in Texas. Anyway, he was up at the up at ECETI at that last thing we did over the 4th of July weekend. But one of the things, that I appreciated about Jim, he's a very practical man, very practical. And he says, look, he says, we're using a whole bunch of stuff we don't need. In other words, we're consuming, we're using things we absolutely don't need. And, so we need to start scaling back anyway. I mean, if you look around you, I think it's, there was a book put out one time called the Peter Principle. And in that book, they said, if you have a large open space, it won't take you long to fill it up. As a proof of it, just go to anybody's house and open up their garage and look at all the junk they have there. If it's sitting out in the garage, obviously they don't need it. So we've turned into a nation or a people who simply have way too much junk. We don't need it. So why go out and buy it? I was talking to a fellow one time. Oh, actually, I worked with him, and he was in contact. He said he had met a fellow that was, self-made, a millionaire, wealthy. And so he asked him, he said, what's the secret to wealth? How did you get your wealth? And he said, well, the way I did it was, he said, the easiest way is to convince people to buy stuff they don't need and then have them buy it on time. And that's how this guy got wealthy. So people need to take a more practical view of what do I need and what do I really don't need. And I think perhaps we're all guilty of it. We all have too many things that we absolutely don't need. And part of that is we do it innocently because many of the products that are being produced are simply built to fail. For instance, look at the automobile industry, look at the computers, look at all, many of the things that should have a longevity are simply designed and manufactured to wear out for no good reason. And so perhaps, when people start demanding better products, we won't have this rapid turnover. Why do we have to have a new model car every year? Well, why do the manufacturers come out with a brand new looking automobile that the engine and the transmission and the driveline is the same old junk they had last year? I mean, why don't they improve the motors and the transmissions and the drivelines? And because they have induced the public to have the idea that they need to have a new car because this one here this year is a whole lot prettier than the one they had last year. I mean, stupid. I think even Forrest Gump could figure that one out, if you get my drift. And so I think those of us who, maybe have a few more years of maturity under our belt than maybe some of the young ones coming up, can have a little bit of influence on the rising generations. That just take a look at what you're doing. Take a look at what you're spending your money on. And do you really need that? Do you have to have a new car every year? Do you have to have new clothes when you haven't worn out the old ones yet? I mean, a lot of it has to do with vanity. And that is, we have to project ourselves in a certain way so that we be socially acceptable. So we got guys, we got people who are investing heavily in clothes simply to make the proper impression so that they appear to be successful in business and all that kind of stuff. No. We have to get past all that. And so there has to be a change in the moral outlook of the people. And I believe that we can do that. I believe that we can when we get rid of the infection, when we get rid of the virus that has been thrust upon us with the use of Federal Reserve notes, get back to using real money and so forth. I think that people will start to take a new look at what they're doing. I really believe they will. I've got confidence in people, and so when presented with the proper solution to a problem, I think that people will make the right choice. I have full confidence.
With the interim government in place in the United States, do we actually have to pay federal income tax or tax at all at this point? And does the IRS possess any legal recourse toward people who don't?
Negative. The IRS is actually a trust in Puerto Rico. In Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico was the United States Incorporated. Everything was run out of Puerto Rico. And so when Puerto Rico went into default in May the 2nd, I believe it was, all of that came to an end. The IRS itself came on shore in, I think it was 1934 or 35 as a Delaware corporation. Then they went to work, and then they were employed as the government itself became more and more under the control of the fascist regime that was operating out of Puerto Rico. Then you had the IRS come into play. Now, immediately when that Delaware corporation was formed, it was purchased by an attorney firm. And so then that attorney firm, I had a hard time tracing them down, but eventually they showed back up as Northern Trust Company. And I've had to deal with Northern Trust Company. I really don't want to get into all that at this point. I mean, at some time maybe I'll write the story, but I really rather not look back. I'd really rather look forward. But anyway, the IRS itself is no longer functional. Many of the employees that were formerly employed by the IRS have been rehired, if I can use that word, by the new Treasury, because they have all the records. They have all the records of all the money they've stolen from people, and all that money will have to be returned to whom it was stolen from under the guise of corporate. It would take a long time to explain all that. But with the new interim government, the law known as NESARA, now I can't remember what the acronym stands for, NESARA. You can go on the internet and study that if you want to. But anyway, that act was put into law in 2000. It was signed into law by Bill Clinton, who was the last United States president. And I can go into that. I have gone into it many, many times. We don't have time today to go into reasons for all that. But in any event, NESARA will be put into effect. There will be no more income tax. Well, there never was. Income tax was always voluntary. Everybody knows about that. But people were getting tricked. People were getting fooled. And so that money that was stolen under that fraudulent system will have to be returned. Now, let me also point to another thing that people don't know, and that is a corporation is created to carry debt. That's what it's for. A corporation cannot hold asset. All right. Now, so all these taxes and things that come in, where the people come in and unwittingly give them real money for those alleged taxes, so forth and so on, the corporations, the governments, and so forth cannot hold that asset because it has energy. So what they do is they put those assets, they're not held by the corporation, they're put into accounts, which are known as the CAFR accounts. Now, the word CAFR is an acronym which stands for Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So that real money that has the energy that was put into that money by the labor of people is not held by the government corporation, not at all. And I don't know exactly how to pinpoint it. If some of those want to know more about the CAFR situation, if you'll go, there's a man named Walter Burien, Burien. He has a website, and you can learn about CAFR accounts by going to his website, because I don't have time to totally discuss it. But I'll give you a for instance. Years ago, probably around, I don't know, 2001 or 2002, we were studying into some of those things, and I was working with some folks down in Arizona, and they had looked into the CAFR, state CAFR reports, and they had found that there was something like $10 million that was designated for use by one of the major universities. I can't remember if it was Arizona State, the University of Arizona, but they found it. They found it in the CAFR reports, and so they went to the president of that university and pointed it out to him. He said, $10 million. They said, well, I can sure use that. So he goes to the state looking for his $10 million, and they wouldn't give it to him. They would not let him have the use of that $10 million. So what I see with the CAFR accounts is that the money which is paid into those CAFR accounts have energy attached to them. In other words, that money is real money because people have earned it by their labor. In consequence of that, that money holds great energy. And so these CAFR accounts, I mean, the energy of the people is being held, in that form. Now this is a real tragedy because it's being withheld from the people. Now, I think this new government that comes in is going to go and seize all those accounts and either restore that money to the people from whom it's stolen or whatever. But in any event, there's a huge amount of energy in those CAFRs. For instance, you keep hearing about, for instance, I think, what was it, Detroit? This went bankrupt here this year or something like that. Baloney. Go look at their CAFR accounts. They got billions of dollars in those accounts. Now, who's controlling that? That the public, Detroit, city of Detroit in all capital letters, why is it that the people who live in Detroit think that they're bankrupt? That's pure baloney, because all that money in the CAFR accounts is, in fact, the money of the people, because they're the ones that created the energy that made that money in the first place, and it's being withheld from them. So somebody's running a terrible scam on the people there in Detroit, because there's plenty of money. That all the stuff they tell people is nothing but a bunch of pure BS. So anyway, these things are items and issues that need to be addressed, on a nationwide basis within your states, your counties, all these agencies and so forth that are collecting real money from real people have to be accounted for and have to be dealt with at some point. And I believe that as part of the operation under this new concept of a republic and so forth, I believe they will be dealt with, because there's no reason to let billions sit in an account and then watch the people in the city of Detroit suffer. I mean, that's pure foolishness. I mean, who? Anyway, pardon me, I got off on my soapbox, so I'll tone down a little bit here.
I'd like to talk about the UK seceding from the European Union. What impact does that have on the global financial governmental structure, and what do you think was the motivation behind that move in the first place?
Common sense, reason, and logic. That's how I explain that. Yeah, the United Kingdom, as it's called, has a history. They have a tradition that they had basically lost when they amalgamated their country into the European Union. There were perhaps some good effects that came from that union, as they called it. It wasn't really a union. I mean, if you know what a union is, then they were not a union. What they were was just another aggregate corporation. That's all they were. And when they started to issue currency in the forms what they call euros, that was all a felonious fake currency. Absolutely was. It had no substance behind it, and thankfully, the United Kingdom finally figured out, hey, if we keep this up, it's going to destroy our economy. And so they backed out of it using common sense, reason, and logic. I mean, I don't even know why they got into it in the first place. When I was over there I did a seminar in London in 2009, and one of the fellows that sponsored me, he was Irish. He sponsored me to come over there to do that seminar. And right that very moment, the Irish were up in arms. And they did not want to be involved in the European Union. I mean, there might have been a little bit of violence going on about that. I don't remember exactly, but eventually the United Kingdom, which includes Ireland, got into that deal, and nothing good came of it. Nothing good came of it. And so when the United Kingdom backs out of it, then that's a good thing. And certainly the thing was going to fail anyway. I mean, it was on its way down because of the currency they had. I mean, those euros are perfectly worthless. And so I mean, they were running the printing presses just like they were running the printing presses with the Federal Reserve notes. It was all destined to fail. It could not have succeeded. So anyway, it's a smart move to get out of it. Yeah.
Now, I've heard you talk about how the new U.S. Treasury is based on an Indian reservation. Where exactly is that, and why an Indian reservation?
Well, I don't know exactly which reservation it is. Apparently, it's in Nevada. But I found out years and years ago that about 70% of the reservations had free trade zones on them. I mean, anybody understands, all that kind of thing, that should make you perk right up. So, as I understand it, the new Treasury offices are on a reservation, no doubt, within the free trade zone.
Okay, I'd like to switch gears and talk on a personal note, because a lot of people have been asking me about the indictment that happened for you in the recent past year. And so can you talk a little bit about that? Anything you'd like to share about it that would give people more clarity, and what's the status of that at present?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about it. There's still some operations I have going on there that I won't share because it might compromise what's being done. But that was actually something that I invited. I realized, along with some of my friends upstairs, that there were some things that I had left undone in respect to certain organizations. And so, in essence, I invited that so I could do certain things. I am an internationally protected person. And what that means is I have immunities under charter as an officer of the Office of International Treasury Control. And so in consequence of that, we got that thing rolling. Because I needed someone to attack me as an internationally protected person, because it's a little bit different, when they go after somebody on the street than when they go after somebody in my position. So in essence, I invited that. One of the operations that I needed to do, I had to get it done in a pretty big hurry, was I had to initiate something against Northern Trust Company. As I had mentioned, the Northern Trust Company owns the IRS as a company. But what a lot of people don't know is the Northern Trust Company also owns the bar associations. Now, the bar associations are private, non-registered corporations, or whatever you want to call them, companies or whatever. Now, under this new government, they will restore the original 13th Amendment, which prevented anyone who had taken any title of nobility or anything like that from a foreign entity from holding public office. And you'll find that over the years, the large majority of our elected officials are in fact attorneys who have, in essence, sworn an oath to a foreign entity, which is in fact the Temple Bar. I think it's probably the Middle Temple, or maybe Gray's or Lincoln. Anyway, to take an attorney, to become an attorney, they had to swear an oath to a foreign entity, which would be the Temple Bar in the City of London. So in consequence of that, with the Northern Trust Company holding the bar associations as a holding company, there are certain things that I needed to do in regards to Northern Trust, and those things are ongoing at present time. I did certain things, and I put it into the hands of those who control that entity. And as I understand it, they are moving to correct that problem. And so that correction is necessary, especially with the bar associations, as we move into the new republic with the reinstatement and recognition of the original 13th Amendment. So that was one of the operations that I did, and there's other things that are ongoing with that too. As far as the indictment itself, don't expect anything to happen with that. I simply had to set it up to move some of these other things forward. You'll notice anytime anybody asks me about it, I just start chuckling. That's how worried I am. So don't worry about it. Everything worked out okay. I do appreciate all those who've been concerned. There have been several people who have been concerned, sent me information, and done a lot of things, and I appreciate it. A lot of people write in and say, "Oh, we're praying for you," and all that kind of stuff. And I appreciate those kind of things. But without exposing the full purpose for which this thing is happening, people really don't understand, why it is I chuckle about it.
Is the Office of International Treasury Control and or Dr. Dam involved in any of the transitions that are taking place in the world right now and in the United States?
I would have to say yes. I'll refer people back to that interview you did with Keith Scott some months ago. I would recommend, if people want to know about the Office of International Treasury Control, they go back and review that interview you did with Keith. Keith is the chief of the cabinet of that organization. Dr. Ray C. Dam is the sole arbiter of what's known as the collateral accounts. Some people refer to it as a global debt facility. And so to answer your question, is he involved in the things that are going on now? The answer is yes, although I could not tell you what those operations are. But his signature is needed on documents to do certain things. And so to answer your question, the answer, yeah, he is involved.
Okay, so I want to talk now we talked a lot about what's happening in our three-dimensional world in terms of the financial system, legal system, and so on. Let's talk about the multidimensional world and what involvement which I know is very unusual, maybe not for this show, but to talk about things that are in the financial governmental structure and then start talking about extraterrestrials and so on. But I know that's an area where you have a lot of connections. So I'd like to understand what involvement these extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional races have in the things that are taking place in our three-dimensional reality.
Okay, well, I guess we have to go back thousands and thousands of years. This planet has been populated from other places. at least 12 different colonizations from 12 separate places in the universe. And so this is one of the interesting things about this planet. This is why so many of the ET groups are watching us very closely, because we actually have genetics and DNA from 12 different places in the universe. And so the possibilities of Earth humans is very, very great. Because we have this combination. We're kind of the melting pot of a lot of these different places and so forth, all of whom have an interest here and who are very concerned to protect their investment. Okay, so these groups that have invested genetics, DNA, colonization, and so forth on this planet certainly would want to protect those investments. And so that's why we see that intervention. Now we also have we have other interventions, not just of the extraterrestrials, but we have other spiritual dimensions which are operating very, very heavily in what goes on here, and perhaps in the form of what people call the ascended masters, who have been operating very, very heavily. For instance, this whole restructuring of the financial matrix has been orchestrated by the one that we call Saint Germain. And certainly he's been working on this for a very long time, certainly since the late 1500s, early 1600s, with the establishment of the World Trust, or what's called Saint Germain Trust, and so forth. So he has been involved in particular, for instance, with the Declaration of Independence. He's the one that pushed those to sign that document. Later on, he was very instrumental in trying to prevent the French Revolution. And so you see him popping in and out of history on different occasions for different purposes. But as we move, I mean, a lot of your listeners are probably very well aware of what's known as the precession of the Earth. As it spins on its axis and so forth, it completely circumscribes what's called the zodiac, and it completes itself once every, I think, about 25,000 some odd years. Now, during that period of time, as it moves through the zodiac, there's a period of time, perhaps. It varies, maybe let's call it 2,500 years, just for the sake of, or 2,200, or however you divide 12 into 25,000 or 600 years. Anyway, those particular periods of time have a particular master who is over that. And for instance, we just came out of the age of Pisces. And the governor, if I can use that word, I don't really know what word to call him, but the main guy in charge of Pisces was the entity that we call Jesus. I think his proper name is probably Yeshua ben Joseph. In any event, he had that dispensation of time. And then in 1954, as we moved into the age of Aquarius, which is the age of water. Anyway, we are a water planet. Anyways, we moved into the age of Aquarius, I think in 1954. That was turned over to Saint Germain. And so obviously he went to work. And many of us who came in, we kind of come in phases. For instance, I was born in 1948. And so we come in groups. Some people call them, star seeds or contractees or whatever, but I'm one of those. I'm here under contract. And so if you ask me, who do I work for? I'd say I work for Saint Germain. He's the boss. And so the operations and the things that I do here are at his insistence, but in conjunction with the designs that he has put forward to make this thing work out here in this last age of Aquarius. And so I do have a connection there. Also, I have a connection directly with the Galactic Federation. I always chuckle, I always tell people I'm a hillbilly. Well, I am a hillbilly. I was born into a hillbilly family, but it's more than that. I was put into a situation that would cause me to develop certain attitudes and thought processes that facilitate what's necessary for me to do while I'm here. And so I've had these experiences and so forth, and have been called forth to operate in certain functions and so forth. And I do have appointments. I do have appointments from the ETs, from the Galactic Federation and so forth, to do certain things, which I do. And so many of the things that I have done have been at the direction of the Federation and or St. Germain, all of whom working hand in hand. I mentioned I had to do a few things here these last few days, but I did them from the position as agent for the Galactic Federation. I mean, I had to get real hard about some things. I said, this has to be done. And I said, and if I said it, the Galactic Federation said it. So I said, go and get it done and pass this message on to... So sometimes you have to get, just straightforward about things. No more excuses. We can have no more excuses about some of these things that these people are contracted to do. And I just simply said, you pass this message on. If you don't get this done, you're going to be removed. And I know that they'll back me from up above. And so sometimes you kind of have to light a fire under people to get things done and so forth, but they will be done. Now, as far as the concern and the interventions, we have perhaps since the days of Babylon, I had mentioned that some group from somewhere in Orion came in and introduced the money system and interest and usury and so forth, and put the whole planet under control with the money system. And that went on for centuries and centuries and several millennia. This thing has gone on, but it's come to an end. It's come to an end. And so, I think a lot of people understand about what had happened with the Anunnaki, some of the things they did. About that same time, the Pleiadians were putting a colony here, and several other colonies hit the planet from different places and so forth. And so anyway, they all fell victim to this monetary system and to the poor operations by the Anunnaki, which is all being corrected, by the way. And so we had this terrible mess, that has existed for centuries, and which needed to be brought to an end and needed to be cleaned up. And that's exactly what's happening now. I know you've had James Gilliland on your program many times, and James had told me that he was visited by the Anunnaki royalty, and they had guaranteed to him that they were here to clean up the mess that was left by these rogue elements of the Anunnaki. So they're cleaning up that mess. We also have had a problem with what's known as the reptilians and the Dracos. The Pleiadians have just about corrected that problem. I was listening to an interview or a conversation the other day. I think it was Simon Parks and Tolek and some of those others that were just having a general conversation on this interview about some of the circumstances, and they had indicated that there were only like 120 reptilians left on the planet, most of whom are underground. Now this Draco fella, I forgot his name, but he was the head guy in charge. If you go listen to Al Bielek, you know who Al Bielek was. Yeah, Al Bielek, in his last production he put out, he had told that he had in fact had had a meeting with or had been introduced to this Draco, who is in charge of all this reptilian and all this garbage going on. I think last report, that he had been trapped on the planet and can't get off because the Pleiadians have come in and quarantined the planet. Nobody in, nobody off. And so that was what the people at the CERN Hadron Collider were trying to do. They were trying to open up a portal so some of these entities could get back in and, go look at the internet. They put an end to that business pretty quick. And so anyway, all these ones who have been causing so many problems, who have enslaved the people on this planet, who have prevented the people on this planet from exercising their free will, which has caused no end to the problems with the karma that people are carrying. With all this crazy forced reincarnation that's going on, that's all come to an end. And it's because of the intervention by these entities that we have discussed here. It's been a number of months ago. I can't remember exactly. I can remember the day. I think it's last spring. I had planned to go up and visit with James up at the ranch there at East City. And so as I was getting prepared to go, I kept feeling all these rumblings. And I thought at first it was an earthquake coming. And then no earthquake hit. So I thought, well, I don't know what that was all about. But as it turned out, there was apparently a bunch of the reptilians and so forth. They were trying to make a run for it, trying to get off the planet. And the rumblings were the Pleiadians shooting their ships down. And so I understood there was about like 1,000 ships that were destroyed in that effort, which was a major thing. As I mentioned, Tolek and Simon and some of those others had reported that there were only like 120 reptilians left on the planet. Most of them got blasted out of the air by the Pleiadians. So the Pleiadians are having a major, and these are fifth dimensional Pleiadians, as I understand it, who are the warrior class. I mean, they love to mix it up. And actually, in one of my previous existences, I was in fact a fifth dimensional Pleiadian. And so I kind of have that in my blood, which I have to work on because I have to get my mindset out of that in order to function in more of a spiritual way than I had when I was out blasting Pleiadians. So anyway, I've kind of had to work on that a little bit, had to humble myself, get my attitude straight. I think Mother Mary has helped me do that, to get rid of some of that attitude. Let me put it that way. So I'm doing better, Mom, than I had previously. So we have these things going on in all these various dimensions. As I had mentioned, this one fellow that I was dealing with was being watched over by ninth dimensional Arcturians. And so I had met with him, I think it was last Friday, and I saw some problems that he was having. So I said, look, we need to go see James Gilliland because James does clearings. So I had the impression that if James could work with this fella, that he could help him out. And so we did. We finally made it up to East City, spent some time with James, and James went to work clearing. He's a very quiet, non-assuming. I mean, if you saw him on the street, you'd probably say it's just some guy walking down the street because he's very, very humble, if I can use that word, but he's very, very powerful. I had worked with him about a year ago. There was a certain problem that we were trying to resolve in regards to a certain commercial transaction, and so I had him look into it, and he discovered a black hole. And I won't tell you who put it there, but once he discovered that black hole, then he went to work to get that black hole covered, plugged up. And he actually told me that he called in all of the universal warrior. He had to call people in from all over the universe to get that thing plugged up. And it took him well over a week of effort to get that thing plugged, but finally he did. He finally got that black hole plugged up. I don't want to go into that, but just to emphasize, he's very, very talented. Very, very talented, very, very powerful, does things completely not unassuming. And like I say, it's kind of funny when people come up to the ranch up there, for Sky Watch or for various events and stuff, and if they don't know who he is. He says sometimes he'd be out, digging a post hole or be fixing the fence or something like that, and somebody will walk up to him and say, "Hey, have you seen this James Gilliland fellow around here?" He'll say, "Yeah, he's around here somewhere." So he's quite an individual, and so I recommend to people to go to his website and look at what he has to show, because people think he's just about UFOs and all that kind of thing, and spaceships flying over, but that's not the purpose of that ranch. He's into developing spirituality in people, and spaceships are just there for novelty, I guess you would say. But that's not what he's about. I mean, everybody's seen, something flying in the sky. That's no big deal. But he's very much about spirituality, empowering people in that manner and so forth. And he does a very, very good job of encouraging people in that respect. So enough said on that then.
And you're doing a workshop there. Was it Labor Day weekend, or when is that?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be up there September, 4th through the 6th. We'll start in on a Friday. What we'll do is that on Friday afternoon, for those who can get there by that time, because a lot of people that come to these events are kind of new to the thought process. So on Friday afternoon, I'll do about a 3-hour workshop to kind of bring people up to speed a little bit on some of the commercial principles and so forth. And then on Friday evening, we always have a 2-hour, get to know one another kind of thing. And at this one, we're going to have a very interesting guest. It's a fella, his name is Frederick Learman. Now Frederick is really an interesting fella. I've known him for some years. He's produced some technology called prosperity consciousness. Oh, very, very good course. And then he started what he called the Nomad University. Now, this is a free-flowing university. You don't go to a classroom or whatever. But Frederick's a great thinker. And on his, if you go to his website, just go to Nomad University, I think it's .com or something like that. Or anyway, in his university, he said the students do not get grades. He said the teachers get grades. He said the students grade the quality of the instructor, and if they don't like him, they don't bring him back. So he has a different point of view, and as far as what's called prosperity consciousness, he'll give some very good key elements to people, basically to help manage, whatever you have. I mean, if you're rich or you're poor or in between or whatever, the suggestions he has to make whatever you have into prosperity is very, very interesting and fundamental. So Frederick will be giving us his presentation on Friday night, and then on Saturday and Sunday we'll go into the full-blown seminar itself. Now, I had styled, again, this particular seminar as Removing Commercial Karma Part 2. Last year, we had, is Part 1, I guess you would call it. And but in any event, I had lectured at Solutions in Commerce for a number of years, and for a number of years I had lectured at Solutions in Commerce, basically in a third-dimensional mode and so forth. But then a few years ago, I realized that many of the people who were involved in spiritual ascension, who were trying to raise their frequencies, vibrations, and so forth, were still plagued with many of these commercial stigmas and so forth, debt collectors, mortgage foreclosures, third-party debt collectors, whatever. And so I knew that was holding them back. And so I on purpose, I tried to insert myself into that genre, into that community. And so, with people like yourself, with James and so forth, I have had the opportunity then to make presentations, hopefully, that would have an effect or to enter into the community of those people who were working on some of these more spiritual processes to assist them. Now, I did a little small blurb, and you can go onto the website. People who want to listen to that little blurb. I kind of did it in a humorous way, but anyway, karma does not exist. The only way that karma exists is if you give recognition to it. And so, and in that same vein, debt does not exist. It's only a concept. The concept of debtor and creditor was created to facilitate our new system of accounting, which is double entry bookkeeping. And so it does not exist in reality. And so, from the spiritual point of view, I want to emphasize again that karma does not exist only as you give it credibility. In that same respect, on the commercial side, debt does not exist only as you recognize it. So many of the techniques that we have developed over the years is to prove that point, to assist people in removing the stigma and the karma of debt. And so many of the techniques that we talk about are to that end. Now, in our seminar, when we start in on Saturday morning, I'll be going back and giving the basis of why what I just said is true in respect, especially to commerce, because many of the things that were created that would be a benefit to people, in respect, have simply been removed or hidden so that people wouldn't know it. Now, for instance, I never became aware of any of this that I know now until I was 50 years old. And so I've been involved in this now for about 18 years. And so I pretty much know the ins and outs of it, I'll put it that way. And so many people have not been exposed to the real remedy that's available to the people. Now, one of the basic understandings that people have to come to, and this is one of the things that I had emphasized at our last event there at ECETI, people have no idea what money is. They don't know how it's created. They don't know that there's different kinds of money. And so many times they get confused. For instance, I had mentioned previously, we had talked about that real money that had been siphoned off into the CAFR accounts. And so people are mistaken about that. They should never have done that. But they say, well, how can I pay this tax, or how can I pay this or the other without giving money? So again, some of the things we had shown about the difference between private and public money, or what's known as money of exchange versus money of account, were discussed then. And I would recommend to someone, anybody, even if you don't come to the seminar, but for anyone, to help them understand. I did put out years ago, I put out a single topic DVD, which was entitled Money of Exchange versus Money of Account, so that people could start to understand the true nature of money. And so anyway, we had talked about that to some extent last year. I will take that back up and then go back over perhaps more of the history certainly to bring in the elements of change in money that occurred in 1933, so that people understand exactly what it is that they're dealing with, and show them the remedies. For instance, there's been a lot of work done on the technology known as accepted for value. A lot of technology involving promissory notes and those kind of things. And so people are basically unaware of some of the remedies which are available to them because they simply haven't been exposed to it. The King James is not the same as for instance, the Geneva Bible. It's not the Nag Hammadi, it's not the Dead Sea Scrolls, but it was translated on purpose. And the main translator in that effort was a man named Robert Flood. And Robert Flood was the Grand Master of the Priory of Zion, closely associated with Knights Templars. Sir Francis Bacon had a great deal of input into that whole translation and so forth. So there was a purpose for it. I mean, there was a direction that they were trying to emphasize. And so much of our proper, I'll use that word, many of our proper concepts and principles and practices which should be carried out are contained within a King James Version. And most people, except most Protestants, so forth, are familiar with the use of King James Version. So I'll go through that and demonstrate those concepts, and then tie them directly into the model that we have and are operating on today. Now, if in fact we were operating correctly on that model, we would not have the problems that we have. But because of the perversion of that model, then people have all these difficulties and so forth that they're dealing with in commerce. So along with that, we'll be discussing commercial maxims. A maxim is, and each branch of theory of law has its own maxims. For instance, you got common law maxims, you got maxims. Anyway, there are certain commercial maxims. Now, a maxim is something that has been proven so many times that when it comes into play, it's simply accepted as being true. And so we have many commercial maxims which should be applied in our commerce and in our business. And if you violate those maxims, there's where you have the problems. And so during our presentation on Saturday, we'll be going over many of those commercial maxims so that people understand what they are. Hopefully that they'll adopt those things and utilize them more fully. Now then on Sunday, I want to get back into the third dimension just a little bit because I'll be going over a couple of the problems that seem to crop up with so many people. So we'll be discussing the remedies, technologies to deal with third-party debt collectors. Oh, that's fun. We have a lot of fun with that. And then another people's favorites, which is traffic tickets. Oh boy, people are always calling me up asking about traffic tickets. So in any event, we'll be taking those things up from the third dimensional point of view on a Sunday morning, and then Sunday afternoon, I want to go back over the information and material because I think it's so important. The information and material on the what's called the assignment of reversionary interest and authentication process. I think that's so important to the people to understand because, again, you know, like your AAE talks about, you know, the awakening in power. Well, when people become empowered, they start to have more self-confidence and so forth. And so many of the things, that I've done, that you've done, James, and all these other people have done, is to help develop within people a certain measure of self-confidence so they can stand in their own truth. And so certainly these processes that have been developed in regards, especially in regards to authentication and so forth, give people a certain higher degree or higher vibrational frequency in regards to their own self-power and their own self-worth. And so we'll be going back over some of that technology on Sunday afternoon. And then I'll hang around Monday for some that might need private consultations. I'll stay as long as people, need that. And so anyway, that's pretty much the rundown of the schedule for that event coming up here September the 4th through the 6th. People who are interested in that can either go to our website, which is wssic.com, or you can go to James's website. I forgot the exact. Anyway, if you go to his website, it'll be advertised there, and you can make that contact. Now, one of the advantages of having an event at the East Eddy Ranch is certainly the energy that's there. There are a couple of natural ley lines that intersect right there in the field. And you can go out there and sit right in the middle of that vortex, man, and enjoy that energy. Some people call that the healing field. A lot of people have felt a lot better, or actually there have been some serious problems that have been corrected by people utilizing that field. And then aside from that, at nighttime, when it gets dark, then they go out and have what's called a sky watch. And so people can watch the ships go over, and James has some night vision goggles. You can look at the things, a little bit closer and so forth. And he has a laser pointer that when a ship come over, a lot of times he'll signal them with that laser, and they'll light up. Everybody, ooh, ah, everybody's going ooh and ah, and all that kind of stuff. And then you have a direct view of Mount Adams. Mount Adams has quite a history with UFOs. I mean, going way back into 1947 with that first sighting. But in any event, in perfect view of the ranch there, there's a doorway where the ships go in and out. You can watch them. They'll come up through the mountain and go into this doorway and disappear down that way, and then they'll go back the other way and all that kind of stuff. And so you can have that experience up there with that. And then there's other things. A lot of orbs come through the field. There's fairies and all manner of entities that that people see. And so when you have an event up at East Eddy Ranch, I mean, aside from listening to me yammer on and on, you can have a good spiritual experience, or you can go watch UFOs, do all those kind of things. So it's a good time is had by all, I'll put it that way.
So everything you're seeing in the three-dimensional world that's more tangible, as well as the multidimensional world, are you encouraged the direction we're going, that we're heading in a positive direction at this point?
Absolutely. I got a message probably about 3 years ago directly from St. Germain. And the message was this: this is not going backwards. Anybody who gets in the way will be removed. And so when you get that kind of message from somebody like Germain, you have complete confidence in it. And so I can say without any hesitation whatsoever, this thing is going forward. It's being corrected. Anybody gets in the way will be removed, either through one way or the other. And I've seen it happen. And so what Jermaine told me those years ago is exactly right. And so I have complete confidence in the outcome of the efforts that are being made. And so rather than, have any doubts, people should have confidence. They should go to work and do all that they can in this respect. again, this is a free will planet. It's been designated as such, and you can have it or not. I mean, that's up to you. And so if you will exercise your free will and make the proper choices, the outcome is certain. The outcome is certain. And so I think it's up to the people then at that point to become informed, to work on their own spirituality, raise their vibrational frequencies, get out of the low frequency, stop hanging around with low frequency entities. I mean, people invite all kinds of garbage into their life. Why they do that, I don't know. But associate yourself with those who demonstrate a certain amount of loving energy or compassionate energy, and make those your friends and your companions. If do whatever you have to do in order to accomplish those things, because if you allow yourself to be controlled by low frequency entities or people in your life or whatever, they're going to drag you down. They're going to just drag you down to where you can't exercise your own free will. So people need to raise their consciousness and need to raise their vibrational frequencies by living a loving life and doing good to all people and doing the very best they can. And some of these other kind of negative problems, some of these dark things that are going on, we'll handle that. We're fully prepared to handle that, and we are handling it. And so people need not be afraid of some of these dark energies and stuff. We're dealing with it, and we have the full capacity to deal with all of it. So don't be afraid, and don't get involved in it. I mean, so some of us who have a little bit more experience dealing with some of those things, we'll handle it. And we are handling it. So for those of you, who are worried about that, stop worrying about it. Stop worrying about it. Don't worry about it at all. Take Saint Germain at his word, because they will be removed, and they are being removed. I get reports almost every day of just who got arrested that day. And a friend of mine, he even had a list of about 60 of them, and they weren't scheduled for arrest. They were scheduled for other consequences. And a lot of those consequences have been enforced. And so don't sully your mind, or don't get dirt on your hands and on your conscience. Let us handle some of those things, because we can and we are.
Well, thanks again for joining me for this show. It's been nice speaking with you again and catching up. And we're looking forward to seeing you again, and James this November at our expo. So I'm sure we'll speak again between here and there, and have you back on the show sometime thereafter. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Awaken Empower TV with my special guest, Winston Shrout. Join me next week as we speak with another incredible individual who's standing on the leading edge and changing the world.